We are on the 24-hour moorings in Northwich. There are other moorings here that are longer, but we got on the floating pontoon thing that's secure. There's like a lockable gate.
People were jealous.
Do you think?
Oh yeah.
It's nice here. It's right by the cinema, so we're kind of overhung by the cinema. And someone...
Very expensive cinema, by the way. Didn't go to use that cinema.
They thought it was a good idea to stick a piano outside, so all evening there's been people hammering on the piano.
Badly. There was one guy who played chopsticks, though, for a few seconds.
Anyway, today we are not going very far. It's just half an hour to the bottom of the Anderton Boat lift, and I think we're going to try and get on the moorings there and just visit the visitor centre, because we didn't go when we came down. If there's no mooring, we might end up going up, but I don't really want to go up today. I kind of still want to be on the river.
Yeah,
and I think
if at all possible, stay on the river, then tomorrow we'll go up.
I think if this hadn't been just a 24-hour mooring, we probably would just stay now, but it's not, so
yeah,
we're going.
Because there is an enormous, but you can sort of see it behind me, but there's also over that way. Basically, we're covered by an enormous grey cloud. And every once in a while it starts spritzing.
But yeah, it's only half an hour, so it should be right.
Yeah.
Should we go?
We should go.
The boat turning ahead is the trip boat from the Anderton Boat lift. I wouldn't like to be moored where that red boat is. As we look back at the moorings we have just left, you can see the cinema complex we were moored next to. As we head round the corner, the imposing boat lift comes into view. The pontoon visitor moorings are empty, so we make a beeline for them. That Black Prince hire boat seems to be having some difficulties turning. Luckily they manage it on the second attempt.
We've made it to the Anderton Boat lift, and it's raining and it's quite noisy, but this is our view out of the well deck. We were going to go for a walk, but I'm thinking we just get on the boat.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
No, that's basically it. Yeah, there's some noise from the chemical factory that's going to be kind of a constant drawn. And yeah, let's just get George on the boat.
The rain doesn't last long, so we take a walk up to the visitor centre. Unfortunately, they're not dog friendly at all, so George is confined to the concrete yard by the upper basin, where you can't actually see much of the lift at all. He's also allowed on the balcony, but it's covered with people queuing for the trip boat, so it's not an ideal place to take a dog. We have no choice but to take it in turns to have a look around, while the other one waits in dog prison with George. The Anderton Boat lift is one of the so-called seven wonders of the waterways. It also has the nickname the Cathedral of the Canals, and you can see why. The structure is unique and incredibly impressive. The grounds of the boat lifts are really lovely, and we would have loved to have taken George down there, on a lead of course. The exhibition space itself is pretty interesting, and you have to walk through it to get to the grounds. It was packed with school children when we were there. We stay to watch the trip boat load and descend, George and I in the little concrete yard above the lift, and Michael in the lush green grounds below. The next day we move across to the holding moorings below the lift. We haven't paid the £10 to book a slot in advance, so Michael heads into the office to check the availability. George obeys the strict rules and stays on the boat, much to his displeasure.
So yesterday, Joe and I came down from Northwich to the Anderton Boat lift, which is this thing right here. and it's been our view all day and night. We didn't come on and go up yesterday because we wanted to go to the visitor center just here, where I was able to learn about the Anderton Boat Lift and its construction and its design, and not really much else because most of the educational exhibits were kind of in a half operating state at the moment. Though I've gone in this morning and they seem to have been repaired. So I think what happens is too many children on too many small classes do too many things to too many, buttons, and stuff stops functioning by the end of the day. But it's working now. So, the boat lift. Pretty fascinating story, actually. Basically, you've got the Weaver down here, which was a very busy shipping lane in the 17 and 1800s, and before that, it was a wildly busy river because it had been widened out to allow salt to travel from Northwich all the way down, essentially to the Mersey. So the boats would normally go all the way to Winsford, where they'd pick up salt that had been carted in. Eventually, though, the Trent Mersey was built up there. Sort of that way, at the top of the hill. And the Trent Mersey came so close that there was a worry on the point of the people who ran the river that they'd lose business. And there was a worry on the point of the people up on the Trent Mersey that they'd lose business. So a sort of a compromise was made. These very large chutes were built. Boats would come up, line up at the end of the chute, and men would cart salt out to the end of the chute and dump it down the chute, and it would slide down into the hull of the barge, and then the barge would be taken out to the Mersey and then onward. So it ends up being a fairly efficient system, but people still want to be able to actually link the two. And in 1875, the majority of what you see behind me was built. The original lift was essentially this large flat stanchion and these two caissons that were operated on an entirely hydraulic basis. So there was a large hydraulic ram underneath each caisson, and basically the one at the top would be filled with water, the one at the bottom would be filled with water, boats would be loaded on. The one at the bottom would have a small amount of water pumped out, making it lighter, and the weight of the one at the top would slowly push down on the hydraulic ram while the one on the other side pushed up. This would actually get the boats most of the way to the point of being in position, and then a steam engine would be used to push the top ram up a little bit further, and that would get the bottom ram into position. Boats would offload. And it was quite efficient. It didn't need a lot of people to manage it. I think it was a crew of 5. It was relatively low maintenance, especially in the beginning, and apparently was able to do up to 16 boats a day, although at the time it never got to that kind of amount of traffic, because at the end of the day, a lot of barges coming along up there, loaded with salt, would go, why pay the fee for the trip down when there's still these lovely chutes? So apparently until the chutes were fully sort of disabled and dismantled, there was a tendency of at least salt to not move down. So what really brought the need around was the potteries. Once the pottery business began in Stoke-on-Trent, there was a desire to get those finished wares up and down and out via the same shipping lane. So all of a sudden, there was a real argument for building the lift. And this was put into position, and this worked, and it did the job, and everybody was happy for a little while. In 1908, things had gotten to the point where the river water, which had been used to actually push the rams, had just been too polluted, and it had salt in it, and so it led to corrosion of these cast iron rams. And as the corrosion and wear would leave unsealable, divots and cracks and everything, unsealable channels in the iron rams, what they'd end up doing is hammering in copper into the scratches in the rams, and this would allow it to reseal again. But salt, copper, and iron don't like each other, and so this would lead to rapid corrosion, much more rapid, which led to much more breakdowns, which led to the lift becoming entirely unreliable. So by 1908, the argument was made by a Mr. Sainer, I believe it was, that this needed to be electrified and switched to an entirely different system. So all these stanchions and these superstructure up here get added because basically what they need to do is put a winching mechanism up top with a bunch of counterweights, and all of these are attached to the caissons. So now the caissons can travel individually up and down. This allows more traffic to get through, and they have this much heavier system, so they need to build in all of this sturdy material here to keep it all up. But he was able to get it switched over in a ridiculously rapid amount of time, and suddenly this was a very reliable lift that was working at speed. It was getting boats up and down. It was efficient. It didn't seem to break as often. Very, very good. Except lots more moving parts. And so in the first few years, this was working great. In fact, for most of its history, it worked pretty good. While Sainer was alive, he had it maintained quite well, and there was a large crew, and this was now the biggest problem, was that there was a very large crew to pay and feed to keep all of that machinery up there well-oiled and repair and in good nick. So it operated fairly well until after his death and after the decline of the canals, because by the end of it, there just wasn't enough money to pay for all of that maintenance. And so in the 1980s, it more or less had gotten to the point of being derelict. And that's when the reconstruction effort began. A large amount of money was raised, and it was rebuilt and reopened, more or less along the plan of the original design. The pistons and hydraulic mechanism now actually does do the driving of the caissons, so it works along the original plan because that leads to a lot less water loss, and it's just generally more mechanically efficient. But it uses oil now, and it's all computer controlled. And while there are people up there operating all of the little gates and sluices and everything that do the work of actually sealing everything, it's quite fascinating. There's this sort of double blade that comes down and blocks you off, and then somehow, I'm a little unclear as to this, that blade is drained, but then that leaves a gap that you can move down opposite each other, because the two blades of the guillotine aren't actually attached to each other except for by a sort of little mechanical mechanism. So now the entire thing can move down and up, lock again, reseal, open the guillotine, and the boat can float out. It's quite a good system, and relatively efficient, and definitely cool to watch in operation. A little bit noisy around here, but that's mainly because of the chemical factory over there. So right now, there's two boats going up, one boat coming down. The caissons more or less move in unison. Well, in fact, they do just move in unison. And then right at the end, there's a little bit of operation that is unclear to view that reseals the caissons to the actual channel going out in the river down below. That allows the boat to move forward. I wish there was a little bit more display of exactly how that portion worked. I don't really know.
It's time for our passage. We pass the other caisson, and there's a single working style boat coming down.
When you exit the basin at the top of the lift, you have to turn right onto the Trent Mersey Canal, as the left-hand turn would be too sharp. Luckily, there's a turning point a few hundred feet away, so we are soon facing in the right direction again. After 10 days on the River Weaver, it's time to head north on the Trent Mersey, and for the first mile, the canal runs parallel with the river below. This is Barnton Tunnel, which dates back to 1770 when James Brindley built the canal. It's 523 meters or 572 yards long and pretty straight. Joe and George walk over the top while I take the boat on through. Pull in before Saltersford Tunnel, as entry is timed and we are about 20 minutes too early.
While we wait, I decide to walk again, but this time I plan to go the long way round. I head down towards Saltersford Lock on the River Weaver, hoping I can meet up with the boat again a little further along.
I wait by the sign that indicates the tunnel passage times, but when I set off, I realize that there are actually some moorings a little further on where you can wait for the tunnel. Saltersford Tunnel isn't especially long at 388 meters or 424 yards, but it is narrow and crooked, and so there's no way to see if there's a boat coming the other way, hence the timed entry. We've sped up the time-lapse here so you can see just how crooked it is.
After expertly navigating the tunnel, Michael carries on for a couple of miles and moors the boat near Acton Bridge. Meanwhile, I'm having my own adventures. I walk down to Saltersford Lock and then watch the boat that descended the lift when we came up go through the lock. Not having walked any of this path when we were on the river, it's nice to see it from a different angle. I walk on a little bit further, but then not knowing if I can get back up to the canal, I retrace my steps and go the long way round. When I find out where Michael is moored, I realise I could have walked the whole way along the River Weaver and then cut up to the canal at Acton Swing Bridge.
We have regrets.
Welcome to the boat of regret.
So many regrets.
Michael regrets putting his mooring hook on an ant's nest.
It was the nappy pin was beside the ant's nest. The rope was then tied over the ant's nest. There was just hundreds of ants. Anyway, it's a long story. It starts with us crossing this morning from the visitor moorings down below the Anderton Boat lift onto the holding moorings just below the Anderton Boat lift, where we sat there with two other boats, and they had been scheduled to go in, so they'd pre-booked. So I walked up to the visitor center and found the administration center again, and got a booking for 12:10, which meant we wouldn't be going for the first
2.5 hours.
Yeah, first 3 trips up and down of the left. So I set up a camera to do a time lapse of the first rotation or cycle, I guess, the first cycle of boats. And I set up another camera to do sort of a 2-camera talk right at about the moment that the chemical factory really started doing something noisy over there. So I couldn't hear myself think. So I kind of tried to explain the boat lift while at the same time going, I'm going deaf. We were then told, well, I was told because I was chatting with the guy who was the engineer who was actually running the lift. He was like, actually, I've got a slot open in the next caisson to go up. So do you want to come in the next one?
I kind of wonder if the people in the office know what's going on, unless boats didn't turn up. When we went down, we were told we were on like 150 and we went on 115 or something. We were like half an hour early. And going up, we were like 2 hours early.
Yeah, the scheduling system, it's very definitely, you schedule a time, you show up, but if you show up early or there's a spot early, they'll just move you through.
Okay.
So
it's just weird.
We got moved through fairly quickly. We ended up coming up on the second upwards lift, and we came up alone. Yeah, it was really cool. Like, got to slowly go up, got a little bit more of a view than when we were descending of the mechanics and stuff. And
and we were on the right side with the good view.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. Then we turned around and Joe got off.
Yeah, me and George decided to walk because we haven't been able to walk on the whole of the Weaver. So we were ready to walk.
And we didn't go very far at all before we got to the first tunnel. Maybe a mile?
Yeah.
And we got to the first tunnel and Joe went over and I went through, got into a position where I could see through, no boat coming, just turned through. The first tunnel was actually pretty comfortable. No problem. Get through to the far side. There you are. Good. Then we come around to the corner to the second tunnel. And that's when things started to go off the rails.
Because this second tunnel, it's Saltersford Tunnel, and there's only certain times that you can go through. So there's 20 minutes of the hour that you can go north and 20 minutes of the hour that you can go south. So we had a 20-minute wait till our 20-minute open slot. I suddenly realised when I looked at the map how close we were to the River Weaver and Saltersford Lock. I mean, it was Saltersford Tunnel, so the clue should have been there. So I had this bright idea that I'd go walk down to the River Weaver and just have a look around there and then loop back up and meet Michael.
Yeah, you asked me if I was cool with going through the tunnel on my own, and I was totally cool with going through the tunnel on my own. Then I actually pull up to the tunnel and turn towards it, and sure enough, you can't see through it. It's not that long, but it's definitely got a bend in it. Coming from the south end, there's a moment as you pass into the entry where if you're on the right-hand side of the boat, you can see this little sliver of light. But it turns out when you get to the far end that sliver of light was the shaft of light coming down from above through an air shaft.
So you just have to trust that the boats are obeying the time thing.
Yeah, you have to sort of go on faith, but still ended up bouncing off the walls.
Did you?
Because this thing curves quite a bit, and it's not like it's really low, but it's a bit tricky because the front end of the boat will clear into a place where the light comes up and you're like, oh, okay, that's the column of the tunnel. But the back end is still around a bend. So then I start trying to bend over and all of a sudden I'm in another little tight turn. So
would it have helped to have me on the front? Probably not.
Probably a little bit if I'd had some directions yelled at me. Yeah, just be prepared to go very slow because basically there's a couple of places where there's enough of a bend that you really can't see what's coming properly.
Yeah, so then Michael came and moored up.
I was going slow because I was thinking you might catch up. I came through the first couple of bridges and I kept looking for a place to moor, and there wasn't really a good spot.
No, there was places, but no one really nice.
No, so I finally was like, I came around the corner at this bridge here, had this nice little expanse of green, there's some boats moored up, there's some siding, it looks like a perfect place to moor up. I pull over. You texted me and said you had regrets. And I was like, uh-oh. So, I don't know if you're lost or anything, but I pull over, I jump off. I'm in the middle with quite a gap between two boats, but it's not enough of a gap on either side for a boat. So I'm like, uh-oh, I'm creating two git gaps. I can't do this. So I started pulling the boat back. You called me as I'm getting to that boat. So I had to hold onto the center line to not actually bump our back end into their front end.
See, what actually happens is you realize how useful I am when
you are helpful. I pulled it in, got the back tied up, get the second one pulled in, get the center line tied up. I'm ready to get onto the boat and just be like, okay, wait for you to show up. And that's when I found all the ants because the center line was just covered in ants. Like I saw, I've got hands covered in ants, and none of them are biting me, but they're crawling all over the place. And I'm like, what the hell's going on?
We had that omen. We went through that tunnel back there, not that tunnel, that bridge. And Michael was like, mind the ants, because there's all these big ants painted inside the tunnel.
On the side, yeah. And there's two tunnels in a row with these ants painted on them.
It's premonition.
So I get here and I'm like, just what's going on? I'm covered in ants. And then I got to the front, and the front line and the bollard here, well, not bollard, the strong point on there. The front of the boat's got about 20 ants on it, so I'm scrambling to toss ants off the boat, get the front untied, realize that the front rope was just being held right across the ant's nest where there's thousands of ants. So I got everything untied and started pulling back, swatting ants off my arms the whole time. Pulled this forward to the front boat where there thankfully is no ants, tied me up again.
Oh, so we got the afternoon here.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up if you feel like it. Give us a comment down below if you want to, and click subscribe because we'd love to have you around. And hit the notifications button if you want YouTube, not us, to annoy you when we send something. So yesterday, Joe and I came down. Yeah. It would normally go all the way down to Winsford. Winsford? Is that the name of it? Winsford Flash, yes. Once the pottery started down in the direction of beyond Middlewich and towards Stoke-on-Trent. I'm talking out my ass at this point. I'm just, trying to make stuff up, mainly because a boat's pulling up over there, and I'm just a little nervous as to making sure that we're sort of all organized and everything, and I can't actually see what's going on behind me. Quite fun to go up and down. I think that's the end of my chatter. I don't know if I've talked about it enough. I hope I've talked about it enough. I'm just going to let it record. Get out of the way.
We have regrets. Am I getting cut off?
What? No. Why would you be getting cut off?
Well, there's a line in there.
Well, that's a reflection on the water from the cloud.
I can't see.
Okay. Myself
Okay,
with
do
an
we need
ADR.
to reset that?
Wow. Yeah.
Apparently the sun's come up.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to... It's going to be me, isn't it?
Oh no, it's going in. It's going in.
It's going in. Not for very long, though. We're in a real problem spot. All right, good. We're ready to go.
Back.
There it is. Yeah, it's going to be back.
Mm.
All right. So, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up.
I'm not finished.
She's not finished.
Ask me how my experience on the Anderton Boat lift was today.
How was your experience on the Anderton Boat lift today?
Uplifting.
Oh, God. On balance.
On balance, what?
I feel like we did a good job coming up the boat lift. We went down.
We did a good job. We just sat there and they did all the work.
Wow.
We just have to sit there and wait.
I sent an email to the Anderton Visitor Centre to ask them about their dog policy. This was their reply. We are a family-friendly site, and unfortunately due to a minority of our customers that do not show as much consideration as it sounds like yourself does, we have made the decision to have a no-dog policy. However, over recent months we've been looking at this policy and have opened up the upper basin areas so that families with dogs can access the coffee shop facilities and watch the lift in action. This has been received positively by our customers' feedback forms, and we will continue to monitor the policy. Obviously their reasoning is pretty disappointing, and I'm not sure what they meant about the coffee shop facilities, as George definitely wasn't allowed in there. But our main issue is not being able to take George off the boat at the holding moorings and walk him up to the top. Yes, I could have walked from the visitor moorings, but that would have meant an awfully long time off the boat for George and I, and as we found out, the boats don't always go as scheduled.